The cacophony of alien voices on Mosaic Station was deafening. Dozens of species from across the known galaxy converged in the central market hub, bartering, arguing, and gossiping beneath the brilliant artificial light that simulated a standard Cathar day. The station hung in space like an intricate jewel, its sectioned corridors and habitation areas spreading outward from the central commerce zone like the facets of a gemstone. For most visitors, the station represented the pinnacle of interspecies cooperation and trade. For the humans of Sector 7, it represented something else entirely. Inspection notice again, Dr. Eris Thorne muttered, scrolling through his data pad with growing frustration. The middle-aged xenobiologist's normally placid expression had grown increasingly strained over the past few months. Third one this cycle. They're barely even pretending this isn't targeted harassment anymore. Mila Petrova, head of Sector 7's unofficial maintenance crew, didn't bother hiding her scowl. Her weathered face, framed by dark hair streaked with premature gray, hardened as she snatched the pad from Thorne's hands to examine it herself. Biological containment protocols? She spat, her Russian accent growing more pronounced with her anger. For a hydroponic system that's been certified by their own inspectors 4 times already? This is bullshit, Eris, and you know it. They stood at the entrance to what had been humanity's pride on Mosaic Station, a state-of-the-art hydroponics facility that promised to provide sustainable, affordable food not just for the human enclave, but for several compatible species on the station. 3 months of round-the-clock work by the best minds of Sector 7, countless credits invested, and now Cathar authorities were threatening to shut it down before it could even begin full production. I know, Dr. Thorne sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. But we have to follow proper channels. I'll schedule another meeting with Under-Administrator Kresick. He seemed somewhat reasonable last time. Mila snorted. Reasonable? He kept you waiting for 3 hours, then gave you 10 minutes to present our case before dismissing everything without even looking at the documentation. Still, there are diplomatic channels. That they control completely, came a quiet voice from behind them. Both turned to see Jax, leaning against the corridor wall, arms crossed over his broad chest. The former military man rarely spoke during these discussions, but when he did, people listened. His close-cropped hair and the scar running down his left cheek gave him an intimidating appearance. But it was the calculated look in his eyes that truly unnerved most aliens who dealt with him. Diplomatic channels are just another way for them to waste our time while they take what they want, Jax continued, pushing off on the wall to join them. They're not interested in fairness, Eris. They never have been. Dr. Thorne was about to respond when his data pad pinged with a high-priority notification. His face paled as he read it. What now? Mila demanded. They're not just inspecting the facility, he said, voice hollow. They're seizing it. Effective immediately, citing critical biohazard concerns that pose an imminent threat to station security. His fingers trembled slightly as he scrolled further. They're transferring ownership to Vertec Agriculture Consortium. Vertec. Mila exploded. That's High Administrator Forlag's cousin's company. They couldn't grow algae in a petri dish if their lives depended on it. Jax's face remained impassive, but his eyes hardened. So, they're not even pretending anymore. They're just taking what they want. Dr. Thorne stared at the notice in disbelief. 6 months of work. Our entire community's investment. Our food security. He looked up, a rare flash of anger crossing his features. This isn't right. It never has been, Jax said quietly. But we've been playing nice, following their rules, believing that if we just worked hard enough, proved our worth enough times, they'd eventually treat us with respect. He gestured at the pad in Thorne's hand. This is what playing nice gets us. Mila's hands clenched into fists. So what do we do now, Eris? File another complaint that'll sit unread in some bureaucrat's inbox? Schedule another meeting that'll be canceled at the last minute? How long do we keep pretending the system works for us? Dr. Thorne looked between his 2 friends, then back at the hydroponics facility. Their facility, where Cathar security officers were already placing official seals on the doors. Something shifted in his expression, a resolve forming that neither Mila nor Jax had seen before. Call a community meeting, he said quietly. Tonight, everyone, Sector 7 was, by all official metrics, the least desirable area of Mosaic Station. Located far from the central hubs, with outdated environmental systems and minimal amenities, it had been grudgingly allocated to the human contingent when they first arrived on the station 5 years earlier. What the Kthar authorities hadn't anticipated was humanity's remarkable ability to adapt and improvise. The community center at the heart of Sector 7 had once been a disused cargo bay. Now, it was a vibrant space filled with repurposed furniture, improvised art made from station scrap, and the warm glow of light salvaged and repaired from other sectors. Tonight, it was packed to capacity, with nearly every human resident of Mosaic Station crammed inside, the air electric with tension and anger. Dr. Thorne stood at the front, looking out at the faces of his community. Engineers, scientists, traders, laborers, all united by their humanity and their increasingly precarious position on the station. "I think we all know why we're here," he began, his calm voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Today, the Kthar authorities seized our hydroponics project, not because of any legitimate safety concerns, but because it was successful, because it threatened their control over us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "For 5 years, we've done everything they asked. We've followed their regulations, paid their excessive fees, endured their safety inspections and their quotas. We've fixed their systems when they break down, provided solutions to problems their engineers couldn't solve, and contributed innovations that have made this station more efficient and profitable." His voice grew stronger. "And how have we been repaid? With contempt, with discrimination, with theft." The murmurs grew louder. "I've always advocated for patience, for working within the system. I believed that eventually our contributions would be recognized, that we would earn our place here." He paused, looking down for a moment. "I was wrong." The room fell silent again, every eye fixed on him. The hydroponics facility was our last, best hope for self-sufficiency on this station. Without it, we remained dependent on overpriced Kthar food supplies, on their whims and prejudices. He looked up, meeting the eyes of his community members. "I believe it's time we reconsider our approach." Mila stepped forward, unable to contain herself any longer. "What Eris is trying to say is that playing nice has gotten us nowhere. We've been doormats for the Kthar, and they've walked all over us. It's time we showed them what happens when humans stop being accommodating." A mix of cheers and concerned murmurs filled the room. Jax moved to stand beside them, his presence immediately commanding attention. "We're not talking about violence," he clarified, his deep voice cutting through the noise. "We're talking about leverage. The Kthar and other species on this station have come to depend on our skills, our innovations, our willingness to solve problems they can't. They've taken that for granted because we've never asked for anything in return." "So what exactly are you proposing?" called out a voice from the crowd. It belonged to Maya Chun, one of the station's few human medical technicians. Mila's grin was sharp. "We stopped making their lives easier. No more quick fixes, no more workarounds, no more solving their problems. We do exactly what our contracts require. Nothing more, nothing less. My team maintains half the environmental systems in the commercial sectors," added Raj Patel, a systems engineer. "The Kthar engineers don't even understand how our modifications work. If we stop doing the unofficial maintenance." "Exactly," Mila nodded. "And I've got 3 people who've been keeping the waste processing systems running beyond their operational limits for years. The Kthar keep delaying the scheduled replacements because, hey, they're still working, right? What if they suddenly weren't working quite so well?" Dr. Thorne held up his hands. "Let's be clear about what we're discussing. Not sabotage, not anything illegal. Just an end to the 1,000 little courtesies and extra efforts we've been extending that have allowed the station to function smoothly despite Kthar mismanagement." "They won't know what hit them," Mila said, a gleam in her eye. "They have no idea how much they actually rely on us." "This is risky," Dr. Thorne cautioned, looking around the room. "The Kthar won't take this lying down. There will be consequences. There are already consequences," Jax pointed out quietly. "They're just all falling on us." A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone considered the implications. "We should vote," Dr. Thorne finally said. "This affects all of us, and we move forward only if the majority agrees." The vote wasn't even close. After years of accumulated grievances, the human community of Sector 7 was ready for action. As people filed out of the community center, there was a new energy in the air, part nervousness, part excitement, and part long-suppressed anger finally finding an outlet. Mila, Jax, and Dr. Thorne remained behind, planning the details of their resistance. "We need to be smart about this," Dr. Thorne insisted. "Coordinated, measured responses that can't be traced back to deliberate action." "Don't worry, Eris," Mila said, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous light he hadn't seen in months. "We've been fixing their messes for so long. We know exactly where all the weak points are." Jax nodded solemnly. They've never bothered to understand how their own station really works. It's time they learned. The effects of humanity's quiet rebellion were felt almost immediately across Mosaic Station, though at first, the Kthar authorities failed to recognize what was happening as a coordinated action. In the commercial sectors, environmental systems began experiencing unexplainable fluctuations that required constant adjustment. Nothing dangerous, just enough to make the atmosphere slightly too warm for Kthar comfort, or the lighting slightly too bright for their sensitive eyes. Mila's maintenance crews began following official Kthar repair protocols to the letter, protocols that were outdated, inefficient, and required mountains of documentation for even minor fixes. Repairs that once took hours now took days, all with meticulous documentation that no one could fault. Human traders suddenly discovered supply chain issues affecting luxury earth goods that had become popular among certain Kthar elites. Genuine earth coffee, once readily available to high-ranking administrators, became scarce. Handcrafted textiles from New Jakarta, prized for their texture by Kthar sensualists, were suddenly backordered for at least 3 months. Dr. Thorne, despite his initial hesitations, found his own ways to participate. Research data that Kthar scientists had come to depend on from his xenobiology lab was now shared only through official channels, requiring formal requests, approvals, and licensing fees, all processes the Kthar themselves had created but had expected humans to bypass in the name of scientific cooperation. Tapping his access card against the lab door, Dr. Thorne was surprised to find Under-Administrator Kresic waiting inside, the Kthar official's scaled face set in its typical expression of barely concealed disdain. "Dr. Thorne," Kresic hissed, the translator rendering his voice in flat, emotionless standard. "I have been waiting for 20 minutes. "My apologies, Under-Administrator," Thorne replied with perfect politeness. "I was unaware we had a scheduled meeting. I would have been happy to accommodate you had I received a proper appointment request." The Kthar's neck frills fluttered in irritation. "This is about the research data your department was supposed to share with the Central Science Authority. It has not been received." "Ah," Dr. Thorne nodded, moving to his console. "I submitted the data sharing request through the official channel 3 days ago. It requires your personal authorization, as specified in Regulation 47B of the Scientific Cooperation Agreement." He pulled up the relevant form on his screen and turned it toward Kresic. "It's been sitting in your approval queue since then." The Kthar stared at the form, then back at Thorne. "This is unnecessary bureaucracy. Your lab has always provided this data informally." "Yes, as a courtesy," Dr. Thorne agreed pleasantly. "But given recent events, particularly the seizure of our hydroponics facility, we've been advised to ensure all our interactions with station authorities strictly follow official protocols. I'm sure you understand." Kresic's vertical pupils narrowed. "This is about the hydroponics facility? That was a necessary safety measure." "Of course," Dr. Thorne said, his voice neutral. "Just as necessary as following proper data sharing protocols, I'm sure." The Kthar administrator left in a storm of fluttering neck frills and barely contained rage, but there was nothing he could officially fault in Thorne's behavior. Similar scenes were playing out across the station as Kthar officials began to realize that something fundamental had changed in their relationship with the human population. The humans were still performing their duties, still technically complying with all regulations, but the thousand small courtesies and extra efforts that had kept the station running smoothly had vanished overnight. In Sector 7, however, the mood was anything but jubilant. 3 days into their quiet rebellion, the Cthar response began. Power rationing, Mila announced grimly at the emergency community meeting. They're cutting our allocation by 30%, effective immediately, claiming necessary redistribution of resources due to system strain. They're also implementing enhanced security protocols for Sector 7, Jax added. Random inspections, curfew restrictions, identity verifications. Dr. Thorne sighed heavily. We expected retaliation. The question is, do we push forward or back down? We knew this wouldn't be easy, Mila said, looking around at the now somber faces. But if we give in at the first sign of pressure, nothing will ever change. I agree, Jack said quietly. They're hoping we'll break quickly. We need to show them we won't. And so, despite the hardships, the human resistance continued. The power cuts meant cold showers and limited cooking facilities, but the community adapted. Engineers rigged power-sharing networks, redirecting electricity from non-essential systems to maintain critical needs. Communal cooking areas were established to maximize efficiency. As for the increased security presence, humans began traveling in groups, watching out for each other, and documenting every interaction with Cthar authorities. What the Cthar had failed to understand was that humans from Earth, Deathworlders, as they were sometimes called behind their backs, were evolutionarily adapted to hardship in ways most galactic species were not. The very traits that had allowed humanity to survive on their challenging homeworld, adaptability, endurance, and social cohesion under pressure, now served them well in their resistance. A week into the standoff, Mila and her team executed their most audacious move yet. Using their intimate knowledge of the station's outdated cargo management systems, they introduced a subtle error into the automated routing protocols. Nothing dangerous, just a persistent glitch that caused cargo pods to be delivered to incorrect destinations throughout the station. The effect was immediate and far-reaching. Commercial deliveries arrived at residential areas. Diplomatic packages ended up in maintenance bays. Cthar luxury goods were rerouted to other species sectors. The entire flow of commerce on the station ground to a chaotic halt. Commander Forlag, the station's highest-ranking Cthar official, called an emergency meeting of his administrative staff. The spacious chamber, designed to accommodate the Cthar's need for personal space and hierarchical seating arrangements, buzzed with agitated frills and angry hissing. How has this not been fixed? Forlag demanded, his translator barely keeping up with his agitated speech patterns. It has been 2 days. Tech Administrator Selvig's neck frills drooped in submission. The system architecture is complex, Commander. The human maintenance crews claim they're working on the issue, but say the original designers did not provide adequate documentation. Which is true, Under Administrator Kresick added reluctantly. The system was designed by the previous administrative generation. Much of the knowledge was expected to be passed down through apprenticeship. And where are the apprentices who should know this system? Forlach demanded. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. There were none, Commander, Selvig finally admitted. The humans have been maintaining the system for the past 3 cycles. They always solved problems quickly, so there seemed no need for Cthar technicians to master the details. Forlach's Teil lechten anga. So we're dependent on them? On humans? Not dependent, Kresick said quickly. They're simply convenient. The system can be redesigned by proper Cthar engineers if necessary. How long would that take? Forlag asked. Another uncomfortable silence. Months, Selvig admitted. Possibly a cycle. Forlag hissed in frustration. And how much commerce are we losing each day this continues? Approximately 200,000 credits, Commander, came the subdued reply. Forlag's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. This is unacceptable. These humans have become too comfortable, too presumptuous. They forget their place in the order of things. He rose to his impressive, full height. Increase the pressure. Cut their power allocation by another 20%. Restrict water usage. Implement Level 2 security protocols. Commander, Kresic ventured cautiously. Such measures might further antagonize them, if they are indeed deliberately slowing repairs. They are testing our resolve. Forlag cut him off. They believe we will bend rather than risk station functioning. They must learn that we do not negotiate with subordinate species. His eyes narrowed. They will break long before we do. But the humans did not break. Despite the increased hardships, Sector 7 adapted and endured. Water restrictions led to the implementation of recycling systems that humans had developed for desert colonies. Further power cuts were met with the deployment of emergency generators normally used for deep space expeditions. Every measure designed to pressure them into submission instead showcased their remarkable adaptability. Meanwhile, the cargo system glitch continued to wreak havoc on station commerce. Other species began to complain, first to the Cathar authorities, then directly to the human engineers when Cathar solutions proved ineffective. Private offers of payment for expedited repairs started to circulate. The station's economy, carefully controlled by Cathar interests for generations, began to develop unofficial channels that bypassed Cathar oversight entirely. And then Jax made his move. Using skills from his military past, he acquired and released a comprehensive data package to the station's public information network. It contained evidence of numerous minor corruption schemes, inefficiencies, and cover-ups by mid-level Cathar administrators. Nothing major enough to threaten the station's overall governance, but enough to cause significant embarrassment and internal friction within the Cathar hierarchy. The response was swift. Cathar security forces raided Sector 7, ostensibly searching for information terrorists. Several humans were detained on minor charges. A partial lockdown was implemented, restricting movement between Sector 7 and the rest of the station. In the community center, now operating on emergency power that cast long shadows across the worried faces of the gathered humans, Dr. Thorne paced anxiously. "This has gone too far," he said, running a hand through his graying hair. "People are getting hurt. Basic necessities are becoming scarce. We need to find a way to de-escalate." "They're the ones escalating," Mila countered, though her voice lacked its usual fire. The strain of the past 2 weeks showed on her face. "What would you have us do? Surrender? Go back to being their convenient servants?" "Of course not," Dr. Thorne sighed. "But we need to find a path forward that doesn't lead to further suffering for our people." Jax, who had been silently observing from the corner, finally spoke. "The cargo system." Both turned to look at him. "We fixed the cargo system," he elaborated, "as a good faith gesture, but we document everything, show exactly how dependent they've become on our expertise. Make it clear that cooperation goes both ways." Dr. Thorne nodded slowly. A tactical concession to set up a stronger position for negotiation. "Exactly," Jax agreed. "We've made our point. They know now what happens when we stop being helpful. Next, we show them what happens when we choose to be helpful on our terms." Mila looked between them, then reluctantly nodded. "Fine, I'll get my team on it. But I swear, if they take this as weakness." A deafening alarm cut her off, its urgent wailing echoing through Sector 7 and beyond. It was the station-wide emergency system, rarely activated and signaling a potential threat to the entire station. The public address system crackled to life. The voice of a Cathar emergency coordinator filtered through translation software. "Attention, all station residents. An unidentified vessel has emerged from hyperspace in proximity to the station. The vessel appears damaged and is emitting an unknown radiation signature. All non-essential personnel should return to their quarters immediately." This is not a drill. The 3 humans exchanged alarmed glances. Unknown radiation? Dr. Thorne's scientific curiosity immediately engaged. That could be any number of things. Hyperspace breach contamination, drive core leakage. Whatever it is, you can bet the Cathar aren't equipped to handle it, Mila said, already moving toward the door. Their radiation protocols are designed for known threats, not anomalies. Jax was already checking his personal data pad, which was tied into various unofficial information sources around the station. Reports coming in of sensor malfunctions across all sectors. Communications getting scrambled. Whatever this radiation is, it's interfering with station systems. Dr. Thorne's expression grew grave. If it's affecting systems, it could potentially affect biological organisms as well. We need more information. Despite the lockdown, the three made their way toward the central monitoring hub of Sector 7, a repurposed maintenance room that Mila's team had gradually transformed into an unofficial command center for human operations on the station. Inside, several engineers were already hunched over displays, pulling in data from whatever sources they could access. "What have we got?" Mila asked, moving to the central console. "It's bad," replied Zoe Santos, their best systems analyst. The vessel appeared about 20 minutes ago, dropping out of hyperspace way too close to the station. Its drive core is highly unstable, reading radiation patterns I've never seen before. Station sensors can't even properly classify it. "The Cathar response?" Jax asked. Zoe shook her head. "Textbook by the manual, which means totally inadequate. They've established a security perimeter and are trying to communicate with the vessel, but getting no response. Their sensors can't penetrate the radiation field to get proper readings." Dr. Thorne leaned over Zoe's shoulder, studying the data streams. "This radiation signature, it's almost like it has a biological component to it, like it's semi-organic in nature." Mila looked at him sharply. "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure," he admitted, "but it might explain why standard Cathar countermeasures aren't working. They're treating it like a purely technological problem." The console beeped urgently, and new data scrolled across the screen. "Energy spike from the vessel," Zoe reported, her voice tense. "The core instability is increasing exponentially. At this rate," she paused, running a quick calculation. "If that core breaches while the ship is this close to the station, the radiation surge alone would kill most organic life forms on board. The physical explosion would likely breach multiple station sections." "How long?" Jax asked, his voice calm despite the dire prediction. "Hours at most. Maybe less if the degradation accelerates." Dr. Thorne straightened up, his scientific detachment giving way to urgent purpose. "We need to get this information to station authorities immediately." "They won't listen to us," Mila objected. "Not after everything that's happened." "They'll have to," Dr. Thorne insisted. "This threatens everyone on the station, including them." Jax was silent for a moment, his expression calculating. Then he said quietly, "They'll listen if they have no choice." Both turned to look at him. "We have something they need," he continued. "Information they can't get themselves. Analysis they can't perform. Potential solutions their protocols don't cover." His eyes met Dr. Thorne's, then Mila's. "For the first time, we have real leverage." Mila's eyes widened as she caught his meaning. "You're suggesting we use this crisis to force concessions?" "I'm suggesting we use it to force respect," Jax corrected. "To establish once and for all that we're not subordinates to be pushed around, but equals to be dealt with fairly." Dr. Thorne looked troubled. "Using a life-threatening emergency as a bargaining chip. It's risky, ethically speaking." "We're not creating the emergency," Jax pointed out. "And we're not going to withhold help if it comes to the wire. But right now, they don't know that we know more than they do. We have a window of opportunity before this becomes a station-wide panic." Mila nodded slowly, a gleam of determination in her eyes. "So we approach them with what we know, but make our conditions clear from the outset." "Exactly," Jax said. "We help them solve this crisis, but only after they agree to our terms." Dr. Thorne sighed heavily. "I don't see that we have much choice. The alternative is trying to evacuate our people with limited resources while the Cathar continue to blockade us." He straightened his shoulders. "What are our terms?" "The same as before," Mila said firmly. "In the lockdown and power restrictions. Return our hydroponics project. Grant Sector 7 limited self-governance rights." In a public acknowledgement, Jax added, "Forlag needs to publicly recognize our contribution and apologize for the treatment of our community." Dr. Thorne nodded grimly. "Let's do it then. But we move quickly. Lives are at stake." Gaining an audience with Commander Forlag proved surprisingly easy once they mentioned having critical information about the mysterious vessel. The Cathar leader, already under immense pressure from the unfolding crisis, grudgingly agreed to meet them in the station's emergency command center. The large, circular room was a hive of activity, with Kthar officials moving between monitoring stations with uncharacteristic urgency. Display screens showed the damaged vessel hanging ominously close to the station, occasional energy flares visible even through the visual filters. Commander Forlag towered over most of his subordinates, his scaled skin a darker green than most Kthar, marking his high caste. His neck frills extended fully, a sign of extreme stress among his kind, as he turned to face the three humans. "This had better be important," he hissed, translators struggling to convey the complex harmonics of his agitation. "My patience with humans is exceedingly thin at present." Dr. Thorne stepped forward, datapad in hand. "Commander, we've analyzed the radiation emanating from the unknown vessel. It has properties your sensors aren't configured to detect, a semi-organic component that's interfacing with your systems in ways your protocols don't account for." Forlag's vertical pupils narrowed suspiciously. "How could you possibly know this?" "Our Central Science Authority has been unable to classify the radiation because humans have encountered similar phenomena before," Dr. Thorne replied smoothly. "It wasn't entirely true, but close enough. And because we've developed specialized analysis techniques that your systems don't employ." He transferred a data packet to the central display, showing waveform analyses and molecular breakdowns that made several Kthar technicians hiss in surprise. "As you can see, the radiation is degrading your sensor arrays because it's partially conscious. It adapts to standard countermeasures. And the vessel's core isn't just unstable. It's approaching a cascade failure that will result in a massive radiation surge followed by a physical explosion." Forlag studied the data, his expression unreadable to human eyes. "And you came forward with this information out of compassion?" "Out of self-preservation," Mila corrected bluntly. "We live on this station too. We believe we can help neutralize the threat," Dr. Thorne continued, "but we'll need resources, access, and authority to implement unconventional solutions. And in exchange for this, help." Forlag's voice dripped with suspicion. Jack stepped forward. "In exchange, you agree to 4 conditions. 1. Immediate cessation of all punitive measures against Sector 7, including power restrictions and security lockdowns. 2. Return of the hydroponics project to human management with appropriate compensation for damages incurred. 3. Recognition of limited self-governance rights for Sector 7 within the station's overall structure. And 4, Mila added, meeting Forlag's gaze steadily, a public acknowledgement from you personally regarding the mistreatment of our community and the value of our contributions to this station." Forlag's neck frills flared fully in what humans had learned to recognize as a mixture of shock and outrage. "This is extortion. You would hold the entire station hostage to your petty grievances?" "This is negotiation," Dr. Thorne corrected calmly. "Something we should have engaged in long ago, instead of being dictated to. We're offering to save the station, including all Kthar on board. We're simply ensuring that afterward, things change." A subordinate approached Forlag, speaking rapidly in the Kthar language. The commander's expression shifted from anger to concern as he listened. "The core degradation is accelerating," he finally said to the humans. "Your analysis appears correct. The explosion would destroy significant portions of the station." His claws flexed in agitation. "What exactly do you propose to do?" "We'll need to send a team to the vessel," Dr. Thorne explained. "A small shuttle, modified to withstand the radiation. We believe we can stabilize the core long enough to move the ship to a safe distance before any catastrophic failure." "Impossible," one of the Kthar scientists objected. "Our simulations show the radiation levels would be fatal to any boarding party." "Fatal to Kthar, perhaps," Mila said with a grim smile. "Humans are somewhat more radiation resistant. Not immune, but with proper protection, we can tolerate exposure would take a toll on their bodies, and there was no guarantee the vessel systems could be stabilized at all." Once aboard, Dr. Thorne continued, checking the specialized sensor equipment he'd assembled, I'll need to analyze the core structure to determine the best approach for stabilization. The biological component of the radiation suggests this isn't conventional technology. My team will secure the engineering section and attempt to access whatever passes for a control system, Mila added, her usual bravado tempered by the gravity of the situation. If we can't establish control, we'll at least try to initiate emergency protocols to move the vessel away from the station. Jax, checking over a collection of tools that looked suspiciously like military-grade equipment, nodded. I'll handle any defensive systems or other obstacles. Priority is getting you two to the core and control systems. Secondary objective is gathering any data about the vessel's origin and purpose. The modified shuttle, christened Gauntlet by one of the engineers with a grim sense of humor, was as ready as it would ever be. Its sleek form had been augmented with additional shielding that gave it a bulky, irregular appearance, but should provide the protection they desperately needed. Standing before the boarding ramp, the team received final instructions from Commander Forlag, who had come to oversee the launch personally. Station sensors will track you as long as possible, the Kthar leader informed them. Be aware that communications will likely fail once you enter the radiation field. You will be on your own. His vertical pupils fixed on Dr. Thorne. The terms of our agreement stand only if you succeed. Understood, Commander, Dr. Thorne replied evenly. We'll see you when we return. As they boarded the shuttle, Mila leaned close to Thorne. Still think diplomacy is the answer? She asked quietly. I think this is a form of diplomacy, he responded with a tight smile. Just not one they taught in any course I took. The launch sequence was abbreviated due to the emergency conditions. Within minutes, Gauntlet detached from the station and began its approach toward the mysterious vessel, which hung in space like a wounded predator, occasional pulses of eerie radiation emanating from its damaged hull. Radiation levels rising, reported Zoe Santos from the pilot's seat. Shields holding at 92% efficiency. Maintain course, Jax instructed from the co-pilot position. Keep us in the shadow of that main radiation plume. The strange vessel grew larger in their viewports. It was unlike any ship design they'd encountered before. Asymmetrical, with organic-looking protrusions and a hull that seemed to shimmer and shift as if alive. That's not constructed, Dr. Thorne murmured, staring at the readings on his specialized scanner. At least not entirely. Parts of that hull are grown. Grown, Mila echoed, peering over his shoulder. Like biologically? Some kind of techno-organic hybrid, he confirmed. No wonder the Kthar couldn't make sense of it. Their entire technological paradigm is based on rigid separation between mechanical and biological systems. Communications with the station just failed, Zoe reported. We're on our own. The shuttle continued its approach, now deep within the radiation field. The interior lights flickered occasionally as the strange energies interfered with their systems. There, Jax pointed to what appeared to be a rupture in the vessel's hull. That looks like our entry point. Zoe guided the shuttle toward the opening, her hand steady despite the increasing system fluctuations. Docking will be manual. Automated systems are too compromised by the radiation. The next few minutes were tense as Zoe expertly maneuvered the unwieldy shuttle into position beside the rupture. With a series of metallic clangs, the docking clamps engaged, creating a temporary seal around the irregular opening. Atmosphere reading inside the vessel is present, Dr. Thorne said with mild surprise. Thin, but breathable with our equipment. Radiation levels are high, but within the tolerance range of our protective measures. The team donned their specialized environmental suits, modified Kthar designs with additional human adaptations, and gathered at the airlock. Remember, Jax said, checking each team member's equipment one final time, we stay together until we reach the main junction, then split into 3 teams. Comms might be unreliable inside, so if you lose contact, proceed to your objective and then return to the shuttle. We have 4 hours before our radiation exposure exceeds safe limits. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the airlock opened onto the alien vessel. The interior was dimly lit by an ambient glow that seemed to pulse through the very walls. The corridor before them curved organically, more like a vein than a constructed passageway. Definitely bioengineered, Dr. Thorne murmured, running a scanner along the wall. The entire ship appears to be a semi-sentient organism, integrated with technological components. Is it alive? Asked one of the other team members, unease evident in her voice. Not exactly, Dr. Thorne replied. More like automated biological systems. Think of it as incredibly advanced biotechnology rather than a living creature. They moved forward cautiously, following the corridor deeper into the vessel. The walls occasionally pulsed with that strange light, and the flooring beneath their feet felt slightly yielding, almost like walking on firm moss. After navigating several branching corridors, guided by Jax's uncanny sense of direction and Dr. Thorne's readings of energy flows, they reached a larger chamber that appeared to be a central junction. This is where we split up, Jax announced. Mila, take your team toward the energy signatures on the port side. That's likely engineering or whatever passes for it on this ship. Doctor, your readings indicate the core is directly ahead through that larger passage. I'll take my team and secure the area that appears to be a command center to starboard. Dr. Thorne nodded, checking his radiation dosimeter. 1 hour down, 3 to go. Let's work quickly. The teams separated, each heading toward their designated objectives. Dr. Thorne, accompanied by a young physicist named Eli, made their way down the main corridor, which gradually widened and began to slope downward. The radiation is increasing, Eli noted, checking his instruments. But it's changing character. Dr. Thorne nodded. It's becoming more structured, less chaotic, almost as if. He trailed off as they emerged into a vast spherical chamber. At its center floated what could only be the vessel's core, a swirling mass of energy contained within a translucent, organic-looking shell. Pulses of radiation emanated from it in rhythmic waves, and with each pulse, the shell seemed to crack a little more. It's not just unstable, Dr. Thorne breathed. It's dying. Meanwhile, Mila's team had found their way to what appeared to be an engineering section, though it bore little resemblance to any engine room she'd ever seen. Instead of distinct machines and control panels, the space was filled with what looked like giant translucent organs, pulsing with energy and connected by glowing conduits. What the hell kind of ship is this? Muttered one of her engineers. Mila approached what seemed to be a central node, a larger, more complex structure with multiple interfaces protruding from its surface. These almost look like neural connections, she said, examining them closely. Like the ship is meant to interface directly with its crew's nervous systems. But where's the crew? Her companion asked, glancing around the empty chamber. Good question, Mila replied grimly. In the vessel's equivalent of a bridge, Jax and his security specialist were facing a similar puzzle. The command center was uninhabited, with no signs of recent occupation. Instead of traditional control stations, the room featured a central platform surrounded by organic-looking protrusions that resembled nothing so much as oversized nerve endings. No conventional controls, Jax observed, carefully examining the platform. No seats, no data displays. It's like this ship wasn't designed for physical beings to operate it. Sir, his companion called from across the room. I found something. Jax joined him at what appeared to be a storage compartment integrated into the wall. Inside were several containers of an unusual design, filled with a luminescent fluid. Floating within each container was what looked like a complex network of crystalline structures. What am I looking at? Jax asked, studying the objects carefully. I have no idea, the security specialist admitted. But they're the only things on this ship that look like they could be cargo, or maybe passengers. Jax activated his comm unit. Dr. Thorne, we found something you should see, possibly biological in nature. Static answered him for several seconds before Thorne's voice broke through, distorted but understandable. Bit busy at the moment, Jax. The core is some kind of bioelectrical entity, and it's in the final stages of what I can only describe as a terminal illness. It's not just failing, it's suffering. Can you stabilize it? Jax asked. Not in any permanent sense, came the reply, but I might be able to ease its deterioration. Give us time to move the vessel away from the station before complete failure. Do what you can, Jax instructed. Mila, status report? Mila's voice came through even more distorted. This ship is like nothing I've ever seen. It's not built, it's grown. And it's designed to interface directly with some kind of neural network. I think I've found a way to reroute what's left of its propulsion system, but it'll be tricky without understanding the original control mechanism. Work fast, Jax urged. Our window is closing. Back in the core chamber, Dr. Thorne had rerouted his scanner to interface with the organic shell containing the failing energy core. The readings confirmed his suspicions. It's a quantum biological matrix, he explained to Eli, who was helping him establish the connection. Something like a synthetic consciousness, but integrated with the ship's systems at a fundamental level. The radiation is a byproduct of its deterioration. Can we communicate with it? Eli asked. I'm trying, Dr. Thorne replied, adjusting his equipment. But it's like trying to talk to someone in the final stages of a terminal illness. Its patterns are becoming increasingly erratic. After several minutes of careful adjustments, Thorne's interface began receiving data streams from the core entity. The information was fragmented, chaotic, but certain patterns emerged. It's not just a ship, he murmured, eyes fixed on the scrolling data. It's a seed, an arc of sorts. He looked up at the failing core with new understanding. It was running from something. In engineering, Mila had managed to identify what appeared to be propulsion controls among the neural interfaces. Using a combination of intuition and her deep understanding of engine principles, she began the delicate process of rerouting the remaining power to the vessel's drive system. The good news is, she reported via comm, I think I can get this thing moving. The bad news is it'll probably accelerate the core deterioration. How much time will we have? Jax asked. Hard to say with technology this alien, Mila admitted. But I'd guess minutes, not hours, once I initiate the sequence. Doctor, Jax prompted. The core is already failing. Dr. Thorne's voice came back. But I believe I've established enough of a connection to ease its passing, for lack of a better term. Stabilize it just enough to give us time to reach a safe distance from the station. Then we proceed, Jax decided. Mila, prepare the propulsion system, but wait for my signal. Everyone else, return to the shuttle. We execute in 15 minutes. As the team regrouped at the shuttle, Dr. Thorne shared what he'd learned from the dying core consciousness. It's from somewhere beyond the borders of known space, he explained, his voice filled with wonder despite their dire situation. A refugee of sorts, fleeing some kind of catastrophe. It was supposed to reach a designated coordinates and seed a new beginning, but it was damaged during its journey and diverted to the nearest concentration of technology it could detect. Our station. Is it sentient? Mila asked, fascinated despite herself. In a way we don't fully understand, Dr. Thorne nodded. But it's aware of us now, and it appreciates our attempt to help. It's willing to use its remaining energy to move away from the station. Can we save it? Asked Eli. Dr. Thorne shook his head sadly. The deterioration is too advanced. But we can ensure its end serves a purpose. The plan was set. Mila had rigged the propulsion system to activate remotely from the shuttle. Dr. Thorne had established a basic communication link with the core entity, enough to coordinate their efforts. Jax had secured the containers of mysterious crystalline structures from the command center, bringing 2 aboard as samples. Everyone strapped in, Zoe asked from the pilot's seat as the final team members boarded. This could get bumpy. Once everyone was secure, Jax gave the signal. Mila, initiate propulsion sequence. Mila activated the remote link she'd established. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shudder that transmitted through their docking connection, the alien vessel began to move. Disengage docking clamps, Jax ordered. With a metallic groan, the shuttle pulled away from the vessel, which was now glowing more intensely as its failing core channeled energy into the propulsion system. Core destabilization accelerating, Dr. Thorne reported, monitoring his connection to the entity. But it's controlling the process, directing it. The vessel was moving away from the station now, picking up speed as it went. The shuttle followed at a safe distance, its sensors tracking the increasing radiation output. 8 minutes until minimum safe distance is achieved, Zoe announced. Core integrity at 17% and falling, Dr. Thorne added. It's channeling everything it has into propulsion. For several tense minutes, they watched as the alien vessel drove itself farther from Mosaic Station, its glow intensifying until it was painful to look at directly. Safe distance achieved, Zoe finally announced. Station is now outside the projected impact zone. Core integrity critical, Dr. Thorne said quietly. It's time. As if hearing his words, the vessel suddenly stopped its forward momentum. For a brief moment, it seemed to pulse with a final surge of energy, a farewell, perhaps, and then it detonated in a spectacular burst of multicolored radiation and energy. The shockwave hit the shuttle seconds later, tossing it like a leaf in a storm despite Zoe's best efforts at the controls. Emergency systems blared as radiation levels spiked briefly, then began to dissipate as the specialized shielding did its work. When they regained stability, the alien vessel was gone, leaving only an expanding cloud of glowing particles where it had been. "Everyone okay?" Jax asked, looking around the shuttle cabin. There were nods and affirmative responses, though everyone looked shaken. Dr. Thorne was still staring at his now-dead scanner, a look of profound sadness on his face. "It chose its end," he said softly. "Used the last of its consciousness to ensure the explosion wouldn't harm the station." "A noble end," Jax acknowledged. "Now let's go home and make sure it wasn't in vain." When Gauntlet docked back at Mosaic Station, they were greeted by a reception committee led by Commander Forlag himself. The Cathar leader's posture was stiff, his neck frills tightly controlled, but he inclined his head slightly as the human team disembarked, a gesture of respect rarely shown to non-Cathar. "The station's sensors confirmed the vessel's destruction at a safe distance," he stated, his translator rendering his voice with unusual modulation that might have indicated suppressed emotion. "You have fulfilled your part of our agreement." "As we expected to," Dr. Thorne replied evenly. "And your part, Commander?" Forlag's vertical pupils narrowed slightly, but he gave a curt nod. "The lockdown of Sector 7 has been lifted. Power and water restrictions have been rescinded. The hydroponics facility will be returned to human management within one station cycle, with appropriate compensation for disruption." He paused, his neck frills fluttering in what the humans had learned to recognize as discomfort. "As for the matter of Sector 7's governance and the public acknowledgement, I have scheduled a station-wide address in 2 hours. I would request your presence, Dr. Thorne, along with Engineer Petrova and Security Specialist Jax." "We'll be there," Dr. Thorne assured him, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. As the Cathar delegation departed, Mila turned to her companions with a weary but triumphant grin. "Did you see his frills? I've never seen a Cathar look so constipated." "Pride is a powerful thing to swallow," Jax observed quietly, "especially for a species that builds their entire society around hierarchical dominance." "This is just the beginning," Dr. Thorne cautioned, though he too was smiling. "Changing station policies is one thing. Changing deep-seated cultural attitudes will take much longer. But they'll remember this day," Mila said confidently. "The day the Deathworlders stopped being nice." 2 hours later, the central plaza of Mosaic Station was crowded with beings from dozens of species, all gathered to hear an address from Commander Forlag. Such all-station announcements were rare, and the unusual circumstances had generated intense curiosity. The 3 humans stood near the front, conspicuous in the predominantly Cathar gathering. Whispers and glances followed them, some curious, some resentful, but none dismissive. Commander Forlag appeared on the raised platform, his ceremonial regalia glinting under the lights. His neck frills were fully extended in the formal display position as he began to speak, his words translated simultaneously into multiple languages. "Citizens of Mosaic Station," he began, his resonant voice carrying across the plaza. "Today we faced a threat unprecedented in our station's history. An unknown vessel, bearing technology beyond our understanding, threatened us with destruction. He paused, his gaze sweeping the crowd before settling briefly on the three humans. This threat was neutralized through the actions of a team from Sector 7, who volunteered to undertake a mission of extreme danger when our standard protocols proved insufficient. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Thar rarely admitted insufficiency in any form. In light of these events, and upon reflection of recent policies, I am announcing several changes effective immediately. Forlag's neck frills pulsed with what might have been suppressed emotion. Sector 7 will be granted limited self-governance within the station's framework. The hydroponics project, developed by human scientists, will be returned to their management, with compensation for disruption. The murmurs grew louder. Many non-human species in the crowd were exchanging surprised looks. Furthermore, Forlag continued, each word seemingly more difficult than the last. I acknowledge that recent actions taken against the human community were ill-considered. Their contributions to this station have been significant and undervalued. Their methods, while different from our traditions, have proven effective. He straightened to his full impressive height. I extend my personal apology for these oversights and commit to a more equitable relationship moving forward. The plaza erupted in a cacophony of reactions, Kthar hissing in shock, other species chattering excitedly, and from the back where the human contingent had gathered, a spontaneous cheer. As the formal address concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Dr. Thorne, Mila, and Jax found themselves surrounded by station residents of various species, many offering congratulations or curious questions about the mission. Even some lower-ranking Kthar approached them, neck frills carefully neutral, but vertical pupils dilated in what might have been reluctant respect. Later, in the newly liberated common area of Sector 7, the human community gathered for a more private celebration. The mood was jubilant, but tempered with the knowledge that their new status would bring new challenges. Dr. Thorne raised a glass of rare earth whiskey, salvaged from someone's precious stores for the occasion. To the team that saved the station, he toasted. To Sector 7, Mila countered, raising her own glass. And to no longer playing nice. Jax, typically reserved, also raised his glass. To remembering who we are, he said quietly, and to never being underestimated again. As the celebration continued around them, the three found a quiet moment together near one of the viewports overlooking the vast expanse of space where the alien vessel had made its final sacrifice. What do you think will happen with those crystal structures you recovered? Mila asked, nodding toward the secure laboratory where the mysterious containers had been taken. Too early to tell, Dr. Thorne replied. But from what I glimpsed in the core's consciousness, they could be something remarkable. Seeds of a kind meant to grow into something new. Think the Kthar will try to take those too? She asked with a wry smile. Jax shook his head. Not anymore. The balance has shifted. They'll work with us now, not because they want to, but because they have to. Dr. Thorne gazed out at the stars. This station will never be the same, he mused. For better or worse, we've changed the dynamic permanently. For better, Mila insisted. We earn our place today. Our respect. At a cost. Dr. Thorne reminded her gently. Trust has been damaged on both sides. Rebuilding that will take time. Some trust needed to be broken, Jax observed. False trust based on submission isn't worth preserving. They stood in contemplative silence for a moment, watching as distant stars twinkled against the void. Every civilization in the galaxy will hear about this, Mila finally said. About how the humans of Mosaic Station stopped being pushovers and started demanding respect. Every civilization remembers the day the Deathworlders stopped being nice. Jax agreed with a rare smile. Dr. Thorne nodded slowly and started being equals, long enough to complete the mission. Another benefit of being Deathworlders, though they rarely mentioned this aspect of human physiology around other species. Forlag's eyes moved between the three humans, calculation evident in his gaze. And if I refuse your terms? Then we'll evacuate as many of our people as possible using our own resources, Jax said simply. And you can try to solve this problem with your standard protocols. The Kthar commander was silent for a long moment, The only sound in the room, the urgent beeping of monitoring equipment and the hissed conversations of his subordinates. "The first 3 conditions," he finally said, "are within my authority to grant, though they will require formalization through proper channels afterward. The fourth," his neck frills fluttered in what might have been embarrassment. "A public acknowledgement would undermine our authority structures." "It would establish a new authority structure," Dr. Thorne countered. "One based on mutual respect rather than arbitrary hierarchy. Your people value tradition, Commander, but they also value survival. This could be remembered as the moment you wisely adapted to changing circumstances rather than rigidly adhering to outdated protocols." Another urgent report from a subordinate seemed to make the decision for Forlag. "Very well," he hissed. "I agree to your terms, contingent upon successful resolution of this crisis. Now what do you require?" The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Mila and her engineering team modified a standard station shuttle, reinforcing its radiation shielding and adapting its systems to function within the strange radiation field. Dr. Thorne worked with his xenobiology staff to develop biological countermeasures to protect the boarding party, synthesizing compounds that would temporarily boost human radiation resistance beyond its natural levels. Jax, meanwhile, coordinated with station security to plan the approach and boarding strategy, using military experience most on the station hadn't realized he possessed. "The approach vector is critical," he explained to the assembled team in the shuttle bay. "We'll need to come in directly behind the main radiation plume, using it to mask our approach from any automated defense systems that might still be active." The volunteer team consisted of Mila, Jax, Dr. Thorne, and 4 others with specialized skills needed for the mission. All knew the risks. Even with the enhanced protections, radiation exposure,